A former ACC coach had some high praise to give to Pat Kelsey's Cardinals. It's Locked On Louisville. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome in to this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my 6th year covering U of L, 4th year hosting this show, and I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville free and available on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Don't forget to leave a comment in the YouTube section below, because as you all know, that's a great way to help the show continue to grow. It is much appreciated. A former ACC coach got to watch a Louisville basketball practice this week, and he had some high praise to give to Pat Kelsey's Cardinals. We'll react to that. Also, some notes from the staff that I found pretty interesting. New ACC scheduling model has been approved by the athletic directors, but still some details to iron out. We will discuss that. Also, starting to preview the upcoming Louisville football game against Pittsburgh on Saturday. The Cardinals opening up as a slight favorite over the Panthers on the road. So good amount of stuff to get into today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. Mazda, move and be moved. A lot of good stuff to talk about on the show today. We're going to begin with basketball. And look, I know that we haven't started the Pittsburgh preview yet, and it's Thursday, but we will begin that later on in the show today. And then the Friday episode will all be Pittsburgh prep. That's what it's only going to be, is discussing that matchup against Pittsburgh. So appreciate your patience there. But something popped up on social media this week, and it was a tweet from Kevin Keatts, former coach in the ACC for NC State, and, of course, an assistant under Rick Pitino here at Louisville from 2011 to 2014. And he released an image that's titled Coach Keatts Practice Report. He was able to sit in on a Louisville practice, and he had some really high praise to give to the Cardinals. But not only did he give high praise, but he also highlighted some things that the coaching staff had told him. There are 4 categories that are listed in this graphic, and above it, it says, according to staff, and that's underlined. The categories are most consistent, best leader, best defender, and biggest surprise. And some of these names might surprise you, no pun intended, but we'll start out with what Kevin Keatts had to say. And you might think, well, why is this notable? Because it's a part of a trend. Everyone who has visited Louisville's practices this offseason have pretty much said the same thing, and that's that this team is extremely impressive. They have a ton of depth, and you hear the same names, right? Mikel Brown Jr., Ryan Conwell, Isaac McNeely, Adrian Wooley, Javon Hadley, the list goes on. But when you have a former ACC coach, you've got the Field of 68 recently visiting Louisville and raving about Pat Kelsey's Cardinals. I mean, I think that the trend is notable in itself to discuss. Now, Coach Keatts had this to say, and I quote, "A very talented team with depth and elite shooting. A unique blend of veterans and youth that can score in bunches. Mikel Brown is special. They have size and length at every position and a strong culture built on energy and effort." It's wild when you can actually define what culture is and not just use it as a crutch, right? Pat Kelsey has pretty obviously defined what the culture is in this program, and it stands for a couple of different things. Never delay gratitude is one of the key foundations of the culture. Energy, effort, one day at a time. It all kind of works into not only the playing style of this team, but the roster construction, the players that they went after, etc. So, I mean, what Coach Keatts had to say Probably something that we all believed, right? Like, we understand that this is a very talented team. They have much more depth than they did a year ago. Now, if they hadn't gotten significantly injured up and down the roster last year, maybe it's different. But elite shooting is also something. I mean, we know how good of a shooter that Isaac McNeely is. We know how good of a shooter Ryan Conwell is. I think that this is significantly a better shooting team than it was a season ago. I do think it's interesting that Mikel Brown Jr. is the one player that he highlights. And I keep trying to find myself, maybe not limiting, but not letting the expectations go through the roof, because I don't want to be unfair, but every time you hear someone talk about Louisville, it's, well, Mikel Brown Jr. is absolutely special. I mean, I feel like we're talking about a potential top 5 pick here, a potential all ACC, maybe all American player. I know it's hard to put those level of expectations on a true freshman, but he seems like, one of those ones, right? He seems like he is in rare air in this recruiting class alongside AJ DeBansa, Darren Peterson, and I mean, that might be your top 3 right there. But those 4 categories, the most consistent, best leader, best defender, and biggest surprise. When I saw this graphic, I thought that this was his observations, but I looked closer to that graphic and it said, according to staff. So this is what the staff is relaying to Coach Keatts. Most consistent, you have Ryan Conwell, Mikel Brown, and Javon Hadley. Now, it is worth noting that Kason Pryor isn't going to be on these lists because he hasn't been fully cleared for, 100% contact. So understand that KP, gosh, I'm not going to call him KP, just Pryor. Understand that Pryor not being on this list isn't a reflection of him not, qualifying. It's more so, well, he hasn't played, so it's hard to put him on these lists. So most consistent, Ryan Conwell, Mikel, Javon Hadley, no surprises there. I mean, Ryan Conwell is possibly going to be your best player. Mikel Brown Jr. has showed out seemingly all spring, all summer, leading into the 2025-26 season. And then Javon Hadley was Mr. Consistency last year. Like, you knew what you were going to get from Vaughn. He was going to be a guy that gives you a ton of energy, a ton of effort. Whether it's as a starter or off the bench, doesn't matter. Now, I do think personally, I'm changing my opinion or changing my prediction and saying that Javon is going to start for this team. And I've started to kind of trend that way, or trend to thinking that way, for the past couple weeks, couple months. Best leader, Isaac McNeely, Ali Khalifa, Kobe Rogers, Ryan Conwell, Javon Hadley. Also, not totally surprising. We know how much Pat Kelsey values the redshirt transfers from last year, Ali Khalifa and Kobe Rogers. Despite not playing, they were instrumental in being extensions of the coaching staff and helping, just helping the team through the ups and downs of the 2024-2025 season. Nice to see McNeely, Conwell on there as well. And, of course, Javon Hadley. It was so incredibly important to get him back, because not only does he give you the consistency on the court and a really solid power 4 or power 5 starter, sorry, it's basketball, power 5 starter, but being able to maintain that culture and have one of those tone setters on the team is huge. Best defender is where I kind of raise my eyebrows a little bit. Sananda Fru, Kobe Rogers, those two goes without saying. Kobe Rogers, really good on-ball defender, potentially the best on-ball defender at the guard position. Sananda Fru, this doesn't surprise me either, considering how good he looked defensively over in the German league. But Adrian Wooley also listed as a best defender. I would probably imagine that Pryor would be on this list had he been 100% healthy. But awesome to see Adrian Wooley as the best defender, because all throughout the offseason, what was the narrative? Well, the Cardinals are going to be able to score a ton of points, but can they defend? And I told anyone that would listen that I believe that Mikel Brown Jr. was going to be a substantially better defender than people believe at the current moments. I thought that Ryan Conwell and Adrian Wooley were going to be serviceable, and then you had Kobe Rogers, who's a really good point of attack defender. Seeing Adrian Wooley on this list gives me a little bit of relief. It encourages me, and like I said, I'm doing my best to maintain respectable and appropriate expectations. But my gosh, it just feels like the ceiling keeps rising and the expectations keep rising as well. And then the final category, biggest surprise, Evangelos Zouguras and Sananda Fru, the two European recruits. My apologies. Sananda Fru from the German league, Evangelos Zouguras from the Greek league. Awesome to see both of these guys being able to make the transition to American collegiate basketball and not have as large of a transition period as you might have thought. So it's awesome to see Zouguras continue to be that absolute bully down low. I mean, you've seen the practice clips to where he goes one speed, and that's 150%, right? And then Sananda Fru, as good as advertised, I feel like. So awesome to see Kevin Keatts giving some high praise to this team, but it's also pretty intriguing to see what the staff thinks at this current moment. So, I mean, I know that it's football season and I love it, but man, I also can't wait for basketball season to start as well. But speaking of football season, the ACC is switching some things up like we thought was going to happen. There are some details to iron out, but we have a little bit more clarity from the conference as to how the scheduling is going to be affected moving forward. We'll discuss. It's coming up right here on this Thursday edition of Locked On Louisville. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. These players delivered when it mattered the most. Let's break it down. For the Louisville Cardinals, the player of the game for me was Colin Lacey. He delivered in a huge way, or huge ways, plural. And this is even after his fumble in the first quarter. Had a punt return for a touchdown, a good amount of all-purpose yards, continually being that Swiss Army knife for the Cardinals offense. And just like Colin Lacey delivered for the Cardinals, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. And before we get into the next segment, let's tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, the Cardinals are a 4.5-point favorite over the Pittsburgh Panthers on Saturday. The money line is minus 182. The Cardinals haven't covered a single spread all season. Will this be the week that the Cardinals reverse that trend? To be determined, but you can check out that trend. You can check out all of the other spreads for this week's college football games over at FanDuel. And one reason I love FanDuel as much as I do is because it fits however I like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So if you're ready to play, download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Remember, what was it, about a month ago, maybe a month and a half ago, maybe even 2 months ago, where the SEC finally adopted the 9-game conference schedule after what seemed like at least a year of teasing that? Well, when that shoe dropped, it felt like it was just a matter of time before the ACC made a decision, because you see the other conferences having 9 conference games and the ACC still had 8. And I mean, in this new era of scheduling, this new era of college football, you kind of have to be proactive or you get left behind. And the ACC said, hold on, guys, wait up for us. On Monday, in an article that I'm reading this from Robbie Collins of CBS Sports, ACC votes to expand football schedule to 9 conference games, 10 Power 4 games each season. So it's pretty on par with what you're seeing from the SEC. You've got the 9 conference games, and then each team has to play that additional Power 4 game in the non-conference. Now, for Louisville, it doesn't really feel like this is going to change an awful lot, but we will kind of discuss what this means for the Cardinals coming up at the end of this segment. But a couple things that need to be confirmed, some details that need to be ironed out. Now, granted, this was something that the athletic directors voted on, and it was not unanimous, but it was a vast majority of ADs that voted in favor of the 9-game conference schedule. However, there are some things we still need to find out. First, is this going to start in 2026, next season? Is this starting in 2027 to where they have a transition year to get their ducks in a row and get those non-conference games scheduled? Because, I mean, we are less than a year away from the 2026 schedule or 2026 season starting. Another thing, something's got to happen because you only have 17 teams. And this was a talking point when we discussed this back then. You have a couple different avenues. I did mention that you could remove a team. I don't think that happens. I really would be shocked if the ACC removed a team. You could add a team, and I was a huge advocate for this. Like, I would say Louisville, call up Memphis, see if they're willing to offer what they offered the Big 12, and bring them in. Seems like FedEx and the boosters are pretty serious about turning Memphis into a better football program. I think it would be a no-brainer. I think the ACC is not in a position to be very selective. Like, choose the team that's going to not only be able to make this scheduling model work, but you need all the help that you can get. I think the most likely outcome, because if you don't add a team, you've got 16 teams that are basically going to play 9 conference games, and then you probably have one that's playing 8 conference games, and the rumor is they'll play 2 non-conference. Well, the most seamless transition would be counting the Clemson game against Notre Dame in 2027 forward as a conference game. Those 2 teams will be starting a series in 2027. Counting the Clemson game against Notre Dame as that 9 conference game, I think, is probably the easiest way to make this all work. It does kind of beg the question, where does Notre Dame fit into all this with teams having 9 conference games and scheduling 1 Power 4 team? Like, how many ACC teams are going to schedule Notre Dame? That's something that's pretty interesting. But another thing, what does this mean in terms of recurring opponents? Will we see the Cardinals have the same opponents? These are things that we have to find out, right? And I know that they have passed some legislation in the previous years to where, hey, Louisville's going to play this pot of teams every year, and then they're going to rotate. But of course, everything's changing constantly. So will there be 3 teams like the SEC is doing? Will there be 3 ACC teams that the Cardinals play every single season? TBD. I don't think this will affect Louisville as much as it will the vast majority of the other ACC teams. Like, I think Louisville is the one team that's kind of like, okay, you're adding another ACC game. It's sort of business as usual because the Cardinals try to schedule the best of the best. Like, they try to have meaningful non-conference games, even outside of that game against Kentucky. And if you are having one required Power 4 game, then you would imagine it's going to be the Governor's Cup matchup against Kentucky, which makes a ton of sense because, well, Kentucky's got to play a Power 4 team as well. I doubt they duck Louisville. Like, I don't know who else you would schedule unless you want to schedule like one of the bottom feeders of the ACC. I doubt that they're going to do that. That would be a horrible thing from an optics point of view. So I think it's going to be Louisville and Kentucky every year unless Kentucky backs out. Louisville's not going to back out. It's also in the Cardinals' MO and Jeff Brom's in his, I guess you would say, tendency or preference, probably is a better term. He likes to play the best. We saw it. This past offseason, Brom admitted on the air, tried to schedule Ole Miss. They went in a different direction. Tried to schedule Tennessee. They went into a different direction, which isn't overall surprising, but having the Cardinals trying to build up that non-conference schedule is pretty key. Like, you have Georgia the next 2 seasons. You've got Texas A&M the 2 seasons after that. If those 2 games or those 2 series end up getting canceled, I highly doubt it's from the Louisville side. I don't see Kirby Smart as a guy that's going to duck those games either, because he had a neutral site home and home with Clemson. I don't think Mike Elko does that with Texas A&M either, because he had Notre Dame in the mix that they were playing. So it's probably going to be a thing where the Cardinals have 9 conference games, and they'll be one of the few teams with 2 Power 4 non-conference. So 9 conference, 2 Power 4 non-conference. It's going to be much more of a challenging schedule, I would imagine, pound for pound. But again, some details that need to be ironed out. But let's go back to this season. The Cardinals are 3-0. They start ACC play here on Saturday. First road game of the season, up against Pittsburgh. Currently a 4.5-point favorite. We'll tell you what the analytics seem to think. My reaction to that and more on this Thursday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Card Nation, this episode is brought to you by Mazda's moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep the game moving forward. I think the play of the game, kind of going back to a couple minutes ago, the play of the game was Colin Lacey's 75-yard punt return for a touchdown. He was able to redeem himself from fumbling the previous punt. He went absolutely beast mode when the ball got into his hands from that punt, and it was one of those plays that put the Cardinals out in front by 21 points. 21-3 at that point, and they did not look back. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. As I mentioned, tomorrow's show is all Pittsburgh preview. We're going to discuss the main storylines, keys to victory for the Cardinals, players to watch, much more. You know the drill. But let's start the preview by discussing the opening line, or what the current line is as of Thursday. One of the sponsors of the show, longtime sponsors, FanDuel, currently has the Cardinals at -4.5. It's -110 on that spread for either in favor of the Pittsburgh points or the Louisville spread. Money line is Louisville -182. So it's not a pick'em game. Pretty close, right? I mean, -4.5. Of course, you factor some of that in because they're playing on the road, and it's interesting. Now, the analytics seem to favor the Cardinals from a money line standpoint. I've looked at various analytics models out there, and it feels like it's a two-parter. They favor the Cardinals to win the game, but Pittsburgh to cover the spread. That's just a long way of saying that the analytics think it's going to be pretty close. Can't really blame them from a team standpoint this year and from a historical standpoint. The Cardinals are 0-3 in covering the spread this season. Granted, might be a little bit misleading because all 3 spreads have been over 13.5 points. So you've had some garbage points at the end. And really, I guess it depends on where you got Louisville at in that James Madison game, because some got them at -13.5, and that would mean that they covered the spread. But I feel like the vast majority got them at 15.5, 16.5, maybe even 14.5. But the Cardinals are 0-3 in covering the spread this year. Pittsburgh is 2-1. Now, I think my perception of the Panthers changed a considerable amount when they lost that game to West Virginia before the bye week. And, of course, Pittsburgh is coming off of that bye, so they've had another week to prepare for the Cardinals. We mentioned historically, since the Cardinals joined the ACC in 2014, they are 0-3. 0-3 at Acrisure Stadium. It's always going to be Heinz Field to me, but Acrisure Stadium, 0-3 in conference play. The last time they played there was a game that Cardinal fans have since tried their hardest to forget, that monsoon in 2023 where Jawar Jordan got hurt. You had Renato Brown suffer a season-ending injury in that game. And the players mentioned that they got shook. Seeing their teammate go down with injury emotionally and mentally shook them. Now, they had every chance to win this game. They gave up too many big plays. It is what it is. 0-3 on the road at Acrisure Stadium. With this game, it feels like both teams are trying to silence the doubts. Whether those doubts are internal from their fan base, whether they are external from the conference media, the national media. I can't speak too much from the Pittsburgh side of things, but I feel like with Louisville, it's internal. This has been the by far loudest the criticism has been for the Cardinals from the fan base in any of the first three seasons. 2024, maybe the criticism was delayed a little bit, but you look at those losses, Notre Dame, SMU, and Miami early on. I mean, really hard to be too critical there. 2023, they didn't lose a game until midway through. Now, they barely beat Indiana. They barely beat NC State, but they ended up beating Notre Dame. So that bad taste that Cardinals fans had in their mouths, it was soon taken away because you beat Notre Dame, and then the high, and then the very low when you lost to Pittsburgh. But you've had a easier schedule to start out this season than years past, and it just kind of hasn't passed the eye test for the majority of this fan base, it feels like. And I know that social media doesn't represent that group, but man, the criticism is really loud. So this is an opportunity for Louisville to silence those doubts that, hey, look, I understand that we haven't played up to the level that we know that we can play, but the potential is in there, right? Like, we can still be that team, but it's got to start here, right? Like, all those doubts, all the things that we've discussed, like, this is the opportunity. This is the game that everyone has circled because it's the first ACC game. You're on the road for the first time. Historically, over the past decade, you haven't had much success here. It's time to reverse that trend, and it's time to build off the Bowling Green performance and start ACC play 1-0. Now, on tomorrow's show, we're going to discuss more of the storylines to begin with. But this is that opportunity for a tone-setting victory. You don't have much room for error in the ACC, so you have to beat teams that you're supposed to beat. Starts with Pittsburgh on Saturday. Full preview coming up on tomorrow's show. That's going to wrap up this Thursday edition. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Go Cards.